The rain hadn't stopped since last night. It trickled down the windows in thin, lazy streams, casting shifting shadows against the walls of our apartment. Chicago had a way of looking romantic when it rained, like something out of an old movie, but inside, things felt strangely quiet. Too quiet. Ashley and I had always loved lazy Saturdays. Normally, we'd start the morning with coffee and some mindless conversation, maybe plan out a brunch spot or binge-watch some show we'd already seen a dozen times. But today, she barely spoke. She sat curled up in the armchair, her knees pulled to her chest, scrolling through her phone with a focus that felt almost obsessive. The glow of the screen flickered across her face, her lips pressed into a faint, unreadable line. I sipped my coffee and watched her for a moment. Anything interesting? She glanced up briefly, like she'd forgotten I was there. Huh. On your phone. You've been staring at it for like an hour. Ashley let out a soft laugh, but it didn't reach her eyes. Just reading stuff. I waited for her to elaborate, but she didn't. Normally, she'd share whatever random article or post she'd found. Some celebrity drama, a travel blog, a weird fact she knew I'd roll my eyes at. This time, she just went back to scrolling. The sound of rain pattering against the window filled the silence between us. I let it go. Maybe she was just having an off morning. Then, almost as if she was thinking out loud, she said, sometimes separate vacations can be good for a relationship. I blinked. What? She looked up, like she hadn't realized she'd said it out loud. Some couples do it. Keeps things fresh. I frowned, setting my coffee down. We've never needed to keep things fresh before. She shrugged, but there was something guarded in the way she did it. Just saying. A little space isn't a bad thing. I let out a small chuckle, hoping to lighten whatever weird mood she was in. Okay, who are you and what have you done with my wife? Since when do you want to take separate vacations? Ashley laughed, but it felt forced. I don't know, I just read about it. Thought it was interesting. I studied her for a moment, trying to gauge if there was something deeper beneath this. Is this your way of telling me you want to go somewhere? She smiled a little too easily. Maybe. I wanted to believe that was all it was. Just some offhand comment, a stray thought that meant nothing. But in the days that followed, I started noticing small, almost insignificant changes. At first, they were easy to dismiss. Ashley had always been on her phone a lot, but now it felt different. She'd angle the screen away from me when I walked by, sometimes locking it the second I got too close. I told myself I was being paranoid. Maybe she'd just gotten into some new hobby, or she was planning a surprise for me. But then there were the calls. Ones she used to take in front of me without a second thought. But now she'd step into another room, closing the door behind her. One night, I walked past the bedroom while she was inside on the phone. The door was cracked open just enough for me to hear the low murmur of her voice. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but something about the way she spoke made me pause. No, it's fine, she said softly. Yeah, I know. I will. I took a step closer, trying to make out the rest. But before I could, she must have heard me because the conversation stopped abruptly. A second later, she emerged, her face carefully neutral. Who was that? I asked casually. Ashley gave a small, distracted smile. Just Jenna. She was venting about work stuff. Jenna was her coworker, someone she'd been friends with for years. The answer made sense. It was reasonable. But the way she said it, too fast, too smooth, made something in my gut twist. I let it go. Then, she started coming home later than usual. Ashley worked in marketing, and every now and then, she had late nights prepping for big campaigns. That wasn't new. But lately, it was happening more often. And when she did come home, she had this energy about her. Not exhaustion from long hours, but something else. Something lighter, like she was carrying a secret. One night, I was already in bed when she came in. She was humming to herself. Actually humming. As she kicked off her heels and slid into bed next to me. I turned over, half asleep, but awake enough to notice the faint scent of something unfamiliar on her. Not perfume. Not hers, at least. Good day, I murmured. She hesitated for a fraction of a second before answering. Yeah. Just the usual. I wanted to believe her. So why did it feel like something was slipping away? The next morning, as she was getting ready for work, I watched her from the doorway. She was standing in front of the mirror, fixing her hair, her phone lighting up with a notification on the dresser. I wasn't trying to pry, but my eyes flicked to the screen before she grabbed it. It was a text from an unsaved number. "Can't wait to see you again." Ashley picked up the phone so quickly you'd think it was burning her fingers. She turned away from me as she typed something back, then set it down like nothing had happened. I stood there, my mouth suddenly dry. Could have asked. I could have said, "Who was that?" right then and there, but I didn't. Instead, I just watched as she grabbed her bag, kissed me on the cheek, and walked out the door. As soon as she was gone, I exhaled slowly, running a hand through my hair. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe I was overthinking. But deep down I already knew. Something was wrong. And I wasn't sure I wanted to know the truth. The next few days passed in a blur, each one filled with little moments that should have meant nothing but left me unsettled. Ashley was still acting off, still glued to her phone, still stepping into other rooms to take calls, still coming home later than usual. And I was trying, really trying, not to let my thoughts spiral. But then, that Friday, something happened that I couldn't ignore. I was in the kitchen, pouring myself a drink, when Ashley walked in. She looked different. Not in a drastic way, but in a way that made my stomach twist. Her makeup was done a little more carefully than usual, her outfit more put together than a casual night out warranted. "Going somewhere?" I asked, trying to sound neutral. She glanced at the clock. "Yeah, just dinner with a coworker." That wasn't unusual. Her job involved a lot of networking. But something about the way she said it made my grip tighten around my glass. "Who?" She hesitated for just a fraction of a second. "Damien." I frowned. "Who's Damien?" Ashley looked at me like she hadn't expected the question. "He's new. Joined a couple of months ago. We've been working on the Morrison account together." That was the first time I'd heard the name. Ashley had talked about work plenty, but never about Damien. I forced a casual nod. "Didn't know you had dinner plans." She gave a light shrug, checking her phone. "It was last minute. I didn't think you'd care. I should have let it go. Maybe a few weeks ago I would have. But something in me wouldn't let this pass without pushing just a little." "Just the two of you?" Ashley sighed, like I was making a big deal out of nothing. "Yeah, but it's work. Not a date, Ryan." I hadn't said it was, but the fact that she felt the need to clarify made my stomach churn. "All right," I said finally, keeping my voice even. "Have fun." She smiled, grabbed her coat, and was out the door before I could say anything else. I stared at the closed door for a long moment, my drink suddenly tasting bitter. I tried to distract myself that evening, flipping through TV channels, scrolling through my phone, anything to keep my mind from wandering to places it shouldn't go. But no matter what I did, my brain kept circling back to the same thought. Why hadn't she mentioned him before? I wasn't the jealous type. I wasn't the guy who panicked every time his wife talked to another man. But this wasn't just some casual after-work hangout. It was a dinner, just the two of them. And it didn't sit right. By 10:30, she still wasn't home. By 11, I was staring at my phone, debating whether I should text her. By 11:30, I caved. "Hey, everything okay? Thought you'd be home by now." No response. 15 minutes passed. Then 30. Finally, at midnight, I heard the sound of her key in the lock. I stayed on the couch, my heart pounding as the door opened and she stepped inside. She looked happy. Not just a normal good night kind of happy, but the kind of happy that made my stomach twist in knots. Her cheeks were flushed, her smile lingering just a little too long. "Hey," she said, kicking off her heels. "You're still up." "Couldn't sleep," I lied. She nodded, running a hand through her hair. "Dinner ran late." I watched her carefully. "With Damien?" Her fingers froze for just a second before she continued brushing through her hair. "Yeah. We got caught up talking about the project." I didn't say anything right away. I just sat there, studying her, waiting to see if she'd offer anything else. She didn't, so I pushed. "Did you guys go somewhere nice?" Ashley hesitated, then shrugged like she hadn't given it much thought. "Yeah, just a steakhouse downtown." I didn't like how vague that was. I didn't like how she still hadn't looked me in the eyes. And I really didn't like the way she was smiling to herself as she checked her phone. I wasn't stupid. Something was going on. I just didn't know what. And I wasn't sure I was ready to find out. The next morning, Ashley was up before me. I woke to the sound of the shower running, the faint scent of her perfume already hanging in the air. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, trying to push away the nagging thoughts that had kept me up half the night. I wanted to believe that nothing was going on, that Damien was just a coworker, that she had really spent last night talking about work over dinner. But I didn't believe it. Not really. I sat up, rubbing the sleep from my eyes, and that's when I noticed her phone. It was on the nightstand, unlocked. Ashley never left her phone unlocked. I hesitated, my heart pounding as I reached for it. I wasn't the kind of guy who snooped. I never had been. But something about the way she had come home last night, the way she had smiled to herself while checking her phone, the way she had hesitated before answering simple questions, it wasn't sitting right with me. I picked up the phone, my fingers hovering over the screen. Then, just as I was about to tap her messages, the screen went black. Locked. I let out a quiet breath, my stomach twisting. I pressed my thumb to the screen, but nothing happened. She had changed her password. I stared at the phone for a moment, my mind racing. Ashley had used the same passcode for years, her birthday. But now it wasn't working. I tried a few other possibilities. Our anniversary, the date we got engaged. Nothing. I should have put the phone back. I should have let it go. But something in me wouldn't. Then I remembered something, her first car. A rusty old Honda she had named Bluebell. I could still picture the license plate after all these years. I typed in the numbers. The screen unlocked. My breath caught in my throat. I went straight to her messages. There was a thread with Damien. I opened it, my hands shaking. Nothing. No texts, no call logs. Nothing that suggested anything inappropriate. Just a few work-related messages about deadlines and meetings. I exhaled slowly, trying to push down the mixture of relief and frustration bubbling inside me. But then I saw another conversation. An encrypted chat. No name. Just a phone number. I tapped it open and my blood ran cold. The messages were gone. Deleted. All except for one. Can't stop thinking about last night. My heart pounded in my ears as I stared at the screen. I didn't know who the number belonged to. I didn't know what had been said before or after that message. But I knew one thing. It wasn't work-related. I put the phone back just as I heard the shower shut off. My hands were shaking as I stood up, trying to keep my breathing steady. I had two choices. I could pretend I hadn't seen anything. Ignore the message. Convince myself that I was overreacting. Or I could find out the truth. And I already knew who could help me do it. I didn't go to work that morning. Instead, I texted Mark. Need your help. Can we meet? Mark and I had been friends since college, and he was the kind of guy who thrived on solving puzzles. He worked in cybersecurity, ethical hacking, corporate security, that kind of thing. If there was anyone who could find out who that number belonged to, it was him. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed. Come by my office. What's going on? I didn't answer. I wasn't ready to put it into words yet. Ashley had already left by the time I got dressed. She had kissed me on the cheek on her way out, her voice light, casual. See you later, she had said, like nothing was wrong, like she hadn't been out with another man last night, like there wasn't a mystery number texting her things that made my stomach twist. I forced a nod. Yeah. Later, the words tasted bitter in my mouth. Mark's office was in a sleek high-rise downtown, tucked between a law firm and a marketing agency. When I walked in, he was already waiting for me, coffee in hand. All right, he said, leaning against his desk. What's up? I hesitated, then pulled out my phone. I need you to trace a number. Mark's eyebrows lifted slightly. That's not what I expected. Whose number? I clenched my jaw. That's what I need you to find out. Mark studied me for a long moment, then nodded. All right, give it here. I handed him my phone, the message still open. His fingers moved fast over his keyboard as he transferred the number to his system. Give me a sec. I watched as he ran a search, cross-checking the number against databases, encryptions, and whatever digital magic he used. Then he frowned. "What?" I asked, my voice tense. Mark exhaled through his nose, turning the screen toward me. "It's a registered number," he said. "Belongs to someone named Damien." I felt my stomach drop. Damien, Ashley's coworker. The one she had conveniently never mentioned until last night. My hands clenched into fists. "Can you recover the deleted messages?" Mark shook his head. "Not unless I had direct access to her phone. If she's using an encrypted app, those messages are gone for good unless she backs them up somewhere." I ran a hand over my face, my mind racing. It wasn't proof of anything. Not yet. But it was enough. Enough to know that something wasn't right. Mark watched me carefully. "Ryan, do you really want to go down this road?" I swallowed hard. I don't think I have a choice. That night, I didn't say anything to Ashley. I wanted to. I wanted to ask her about the number, about the messages, about why she had deleted everything except for the one text that said more than I needed to know. But I didn't, because I wasn't done gathering the truth yet. I needed more. I needed undeniable proof. And I knew exactly how to get it. By the time Ashley got home that night, I had already made up my mind. She walked through the door, dropping her purse onto the counter like it was any other day. "Hey," she said casually, giving me a quick peck on the cheek. "How was your day?" I forced a smile. "Same as always." "You?" She stretched, rolling her shoulders. "Busy. Just glad to be home." Home. The word felt foreign coming from her. I watched her as she moved around the kitchen, pouring herself a glass of wine, checking her phone between sips. I wondered what kind of message she was waiting for. If Damien had texted her. If she was deleting it before I could see. I wanted to ask. I wanted to confront her. But not yet. Instead, I leaned against the counter, keeping my voice light. "You working late tomorrow?" Ashley shook her head, tucking her phone into her pocket. "Nope. Actually, I was thinking about going to the gym after work." The gym. Ashley hadn't gone to the gym in months. I forced my expression to stay neutral. "Good for you." "Which one?" She hesitated, just for a second. Then she smiled. "The one on Clark Street." That was the moment I knew she was lying. Because the gym on Clark Street had shut down 3 months ago. And she had no idea that I knew that. The next day, I took off work. I told my boss I wasn't feeling well, which wasn't entirely untrue. The knots in my stomach hadn't gone away since I saw that message on Ashley's phone. I waited until she left for work, then grabbed my keys and drove to her office building. I parked a block away and watched from a distance, my heart pounding harder than I wanted to admit. At exactly 5:45 p.m., Ashley stepped outside. She wasn't alone. Damien was with her. They stood on the sidewalk talking, laughing, too close. Then, after a few minutes, Ashley glanced around, like she was making sure no one was watching, and walked toward the back of the building. Damien followed. I gripped the steering wheel, my blood running cold. Instead of heading toward her car, or the gym she claimed to be going to, Ashley and Damien slipped into a taxi. I pulled out my phone and quickly called for an Uber, my hands shaking as I watched their cab pull away. When my ride finally arrived, I gave the driver one simple instruction. Follow that taxi. 15 minutes later, we pulled up to a hotel. Not just any hotel. A high-end, 5-star place in downtown Chicago. The kind of place you didn't go to unless you had a damn good reason. Ashley and Damien stepped out of the cab, moving quickly toward the entrance. They didn't look around. They didn't hesitate. They knew exactly where they were going. I felt like I couldn't breathe. "Do you want me to keep going?" the Uber driver asked, his voice pulling me back to reality. I swallowed hard, my fingers tightening into a fist. "No," I said, my voice hollow. "This is fine." I got out of the car and stood there on the sidewalk, watching as my wife disappeared into a hotel with another man. Not a bar, not a restaurant, a hotel. And she had looked so comfortable doing it, like it wasn't the first time. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone, staring at the empty screen. I could call her right now, ask her where she was, listen to whatever lie she came up with. or I could wait, because whatever she thought she was hiding, she wasn't going to be able to hide it much longer. I didn't go home. Couldn't. Instead, I walked into the hotel lobby, my heart hammering in my chest. I had no plan, no idea what I was doing, just a desperate need to know the truth. The concierge barely looked at me as I walked past the check-in desk. I kept my head down and made my way toward the elevators. If Ashley and Damien had booked a room, I needed to find out which one. Then, as I turned the corner, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Damien. He was stepping out of the elevator alone, adjusting the collar of his shirt, his expression relaxed. I ducked behind a nearby column, my breath catching in my throat. What the hell was he doing leaving the room without Ashley? I waited, watching as he walked through the lobby, pulling out his phone. He typed something, then slipped the device back into his pocket before heading outside. For a second, I considered following him, confronting him, beating the answers out of him if I had to. But I needed to see her. I needed to catch her myself. I waited until the elevator doors slid shut again, then stepped inside and rode up to the same floor Damien had just come from. When the doors opened, I stepped into the quiet hallway, my stomach in knots. I didn't even know what I was looking for. A sign, a clue, anything. Then I spotted it. A door slightly ajar. I moved closer, my heart slamming against my ribs, every muscle in my body tense. I pushed the door open, and there she was, Ashley, standing near the hotel bed, her back to me. She had changed into something different, something softer, more relaxed. Her hair was damp, like she had just taken a shower. She was alone. For a split second I thought maybe, just maybe, I had been wrong. But then she turned around, and the look on her face said everything. Pure, unfiltered shock. "Ryan?" she gasped, her eyes going wide. I stared at her, taking in every detail. The fresh sheets, the wine glass on the nightstand, the way she had frozen as if caught in the act. She opened her mouth like she was about to explain. I didn't want to hear it. I turned and walked out. She didn't come after me. Not right away. But the second I stepped into the elevator, my phone buzzed. "Ashley, Ryan, please, let me explain." I didn't respond, because there was nothing left to say. I barely remember the drive home. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white, my mind racing with everything I had just seen. She had lied, over and over again, and I had let her. But I wasn't going to let her talk her way out of this. When I got home, I pulled up the hotel's website and booked a copy of the receipt from their system. I printed out the confirmation, along with the timestamps. Then I went through Ashley's social media, grabbing every photo she had posted in the last few weeks. Pictures of her nights out with the girls, every carefully crafted lie. I put it all in a box, and I left it on the kitchen table, waiting for her to come home. Ashley walked through the door just after midnight. I was already sitting at the table, the evidence in front of me. She stopped cold when she saw it. "Ryan," her voice was barely above a whisper. I didn't speak. I just gestured to the box. Slowly, she walked over and looked inside. Her face drained of color as she picked up the hotel receipt. The pictures. The proof. She didn't try to deny it. Instead, she sank into the chair across from me, her shoulders slumping like the weight of her lies had finally caught up to her. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I leaned forward, my voice ice cold. "How long?" She swallowed hard. "A few months." Months. I clenched my jaw, my vision blurring with rage. "Why?" I asked. Ashley wiped at her eyes, shaking her head. "I don't know. It just happened." I let out a bitter laugh. "It just happened?" She nodded, but she wouldn't meet my eyes. I stood up, walked over to the doorway, and pointed at the suitcases I had already packed for her. "Get out." Ashley's breath hitched. "Ryan, I don't care," I cut her off. "You made your choice. Now live with it." She hesitated. For a second I thought she might fight me on it. But then, without another word, she grabbed the suitcases and walked out. I didn't watch her leave. Didn't wait for the sound of the door closing behind her. I just sat back down, staring at the box of evidence in front of me, feeling nothing. No sadness. No relief. Just emptiness. A week later, I got a call from an unknown number. I answered without thinking. Ryan? The voice on the other end made my blood boil. Damien. Listen, man. I didn't know she was married. I didn't say a word. I swear. She never told me, he continued. If I had known. I hung up. I didn't need his excuses. I already knew the truth. 2 weeks passed. Then one night there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find Ashley standing there, looking exhausted, like she hadn't slept in days. Ryan, she whispered, her voice breaking. Please? Can we talk? I stared at her. Then, slowly, I reached into my pocket, pulled out the key she had given me the day we moved in together, and placed it in her hand. Her eyes filled with tears. What does this mean? It means, I said quietly, you don't live here anymore. Ashley let out a choked sob. I still love you. I didn't answer. I just stepped back and closed the door. The next morning, I packed up the last of her things into a box and left it outside. Then I changed the locks. I threw away our wedding photos. I cleaned the apartment until there was no trace of her left. And for the first time in months, I walked outside, took a deep breath of the cold winter air, and felt free.